Hello YouTube. Okay, so today we're going to talk about postmodernism and we'll examine the works of Guy Debord and Baudrillard and a few others, including the Frankfurt School. So to begin with, I think we should look at a brief definition of postmodernism as it was explained to me through the metaphor of Star Trek. So here we have the first five or so Star Trek series, starting with the original Star Trek, Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, and Enterprise. So in the first two, we have these two are representative of modernity. So the stated goal of the mission of Starfleet is to explore the galaxy, to boldly go where no man has gone before. So it's all about progress, and this would be equated with male patriarchy and colonialism. Whereas then when we move into Deep Space Nine territory, it's set on a space station, so they're no longer traveling around. They've kind of stopped, and they're like, well, where do we have left to go? Then by Voyager, if you've watched it, you know they're completely lost. So this point represents postmodernism. They don't know where they're going. They're just going around in circles. And then another part of postmodernism is so that they're no longer searching to like explore and to boldly go. They're kind of looking to get back home. So this is the goal of postmodernism. It's no longer about progress and moving forward in the sense that modernity was. Rather, it's kind of looking back to the roots of what. Not really sure, but it's certainly postmodernism is quite referential in terms of society. It likes to look back at the roots of society, and its purpose is to examine society in order to change it and, as they claim, emancipate it. So then Star Trek Enterprise is a good sort of example of that, because it goes right back to even before Kirk's days. So this is a sort of an expression of postmodernism in that sense. And then the newest Star Trek, which isn't here, but it's called Star Trek. It's called Star Trek Discovery. That would be the embodiment of certain Frankfurt School ideas to do with postmodernism. Would be like more culture theory. So there's the Frankfurt School, and they were sort of maybe in the start of the whole postmodernist movement would have begun with them. They but as we'll see, they were born from Marxist critical theory, communism essentially. So let's look at Guy Debord first, because he's sort of Guy Debord is quite a recent figure in postmodernism, and was an artist, French Marxist theorist, philosopher, and filmmaker. He was also the founding member of the Situationist International. So the important thing that he did was Society of Spectacle, in particular the book here. So it was a work of philosophy and Marxist critical theory, in which the author develops and presents the concept of the spectacle, which is society. The book is considered a seminal text for the Situationist movement. So if you look here, Debord traces the development of a modern society in which authentic social life has been replaced with its representation. All that was once directly lived has become mere representation. So if we think of like our advertising, our movies and television, it's all representative. These people aren't really flying through space, obviously, and so if our goal is to do that, it's sort of based on this representation, and then if we succeed, it was never really true. Or if we were to model our lives on the scripted interactions of these characters, then once again we aren't living in a real reality. But obviously Debord wasn't talking in reference to Star Trek. He was more considering advertising and that kind of thing, how we buy into a consumerist society that so if we see like an ad for a holiday or a car, and then if we try and buy that car, we are trying to buy the vision that advertisement gives us. So, and since that is all constructed and not real, therefore the life that we are trying to get for ourselves is also not real. So, and a major point of this is the idea of relationships. So and social life, and that arises from another aspect that was heavily pushed by the Frankfurt School, which is psychology, namely Freud's work on isolationism and other aspects, distanciation, which they all believed was brought about by capitalist societies. So let's have a look at this. All that was once directly lived has become mere representation. Debord argues that the history of social life can be understood as the decline of being into having, and having into merely appearing. This condition, according to Debord, is the historical moment at which the commodity completes its colonization of social life. So it's kind of to do with colonialism as well, but I don't think Debord would have been that hung up on that aspect, but I'm not sure. The spectacle is the inverted image of society in which relations between commodities have supplanted relationships between people. So again, it's this idea of distanciation, in which passive identification with the spectacle supplants genuine activity. So what is the spectacle really? When we're talking about advertisements and images and stuff like that, we're really talking about symbols and what we hope to aspire to. So what the situationists here and the postmodernists want to do are remove symbols from society and remove the goals of that society, and that sort of undermines it, and also critiquing those things. So what, you want to be healthy, you want to be good looking, you want to start a family, that's all patriarchal or vain, or or hurting the planet, I suppose, could be another one. So he's suggesting here that the spectacle is not a collection of images, rather it is a social relation among people mediated by images. So again, there are that's not really that important, but again, it's the images are the symbols of our society and the symbols of who we would aspire to be, and I suppose they're criticizing whether what modern society wants for us, whether that's good. So there's a bit of a contradiction there, though, because they're talking about isolationism within society, and they're claiming that the source of that isolation is the society itself, when the only thing that can save us from being atomized and alone is society, because society by definition is kind of the collection of humanity, or particular groups of humanity. So by attacking the social structure, they are only going to increase atomization and loneliness and isolationism. So we'll continue on, and that's really the purpose. So in the analysis of spectacular society, Debord notes that the quality of life is impoverished with such a lack of authenticity that human perceptions are affected, and an attendant degradation of knowledge, which in turn hinders critical thought. So that's interesting. You know, one of the big drivers of symbolism in our culture would be TV and film, and one of the big criticisms that people have of television is that it sort of bypasses the critical filter that people have in their mind. It sort of hypnotizes them and makes them believe all sorts of rubbish and lies. So by you could have a point there that by attacking TV and symbolism, perhaps you'd gather more. People would be able to critique society better, or critique what they're being told better. Now, let's see. So, but ironically, Debord was a filmmaker himself. So, in a sense, he was contributing to the society of the spectacle and using the very thing that he is criticizing, which is imagery, to prove his point. If we look at his movie Guy Debord, The Society of the Spectacle, 1973, you'll see many examples of what he's considering spectacle. Advertising here, consumerism, suggesting the unreality of it, mass production. We'll get into Baudrillard's thoughts on mass production as well. So and consumerism and how we're kind of being sold a lie, I suppose, is the idea. And then conventional ideas of beauty, which are really just health. So they view all this as kind of toxic and poisonous and contributing to people's feeling of being alone. Power. They're very, very interested in symbols of power, symbols of sex symbols, symbols of status, and yeah. So then, some of the work that Guy Debord did, one of them is called dérive, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. It means drift. It's a revolutionary strategy originally put forward by the theory of dérive by Guy Debord. It's a mode of experimental behavior linked to the conditions of urban society, a technique of rapid passage through varied ambiances. It is an unplanned journey through a landscape, usually urban, in which participants drop their everyday relations and let themselves be drawn by the attractors of the train and the encounters they find there. So if we look here, dérive continued to be a critical concept in the theories of Situationist International, a radical group of avant-garde artists and political theorists. That's very important. Political theorists was formed out of the Letterist International, Cobra, and the international movement for an Imaginist Bauhaus. So Cobra here, obviously to do with the snake, and that's very important. The symbol of the snake is very important to these people as well. You can see it here. This is sex magic ritual that they had planned for 2004. Now, so the symbol of the snake is important. If you think of Monty Python as well, they were a cultural Marxist critique group, mostly critiquing Christian values in the life of Brian and things like that. Society of the Spectacle. We get back to that. Oh yeah, central to this school of thought was the claim that alienation is more than an emotive. This would be Freud's psychological work. That the claim that alienation is more than an emotive descriptive or an aspect of individual psychology. Rather, it is a consequence of the mercantile form of social organization that has reached its climax in capitalism, as theorized by Herbert Marcuse of the Frankfurt School. So, again, by suggesting that alienation is not an aspect of individual psychology, but a consequence of society at large, is once again contradictory, but it is also, as we will see, a Marxist philosophy. Now, it is interesting. So we have there a direct link, obviously, between Guy Debord and Post-modernism, as he's one of the founding members, and the Frankfurt School. So we'll go look at the Frankfurt School for a bit. The Frankfurt School is a school of social theory and philosophy associated in part with the Institute for Social Research at the Goethe University, Frankfurt. They were founded during the interwar period. The school consisted of neo-Marxists, citation needed, it says, dissidents uncomfortable with existing capitalist, fascist or communist systems. Now, it's pretty obvious that they're neo-Marxist because, we'll see that they are anyway, but Guy Debord is obviously a neo-Marxist himself, and he's directly related to these people. So, but we'll just continue on. So many of these theorists believe that traditional theory could not adequately explain the turbulent and unexpected development of capitalist societies. So they're critiquing capitalist societies in the 20th century. Critical of both capitalism and Soviet socialism, their writings pointed to the possibility of an alternative path to social development. So the philosophical tradition now referred to as the Frankfurt School, which started in Germany but then moved to America after the rise of the Nazis. So if we look at who's involved in this, we have Max Horkheimer, philosopher, sociologist and social psychologist. And then we also have the school's most talented theorists, including Theodor Adorno, philosopher, psychologist and musicologist, Erich Fromm, psychoanalyst, and Herbert Marcuse, philosopher. So, really what they were was a collection, like a university of people who were going to sit down, examine Western capitalist societies as they framed them as, and break them down. So what they wanted to do was find the core sort of symbolic elements of those societies and critique the hell out of them and make people really question them and not want to be a part of it. And that would cause the system to break down. So they decided to do that. Just prior to that, though, the reason why they left Germany in the first place was due to the political turmoil of Germany's troubled interwar years, the failure of the communist revolution in Western Europe. But that's interesting because the troubled interwar years were troubled because of communist Marxists, like this group of people. If you have the 1918 German Revolution, which directly led to the rise of Hitler, as about 2 million people tried to revolt and take over the country, and they were led by cultural Marxists like Marcuse and Max Horkheimer. So basically, after they got kicked out of Germany, they just moved to America and started to do the exact same thing in America. Well, actually, not the exact same thing, because they knew that Marxist communism wouldn't fly in the US, so they had to rebrand it, and that's really what critical theory is to begin with, and later postmodernism, and we'll see the development of their philosophy soon enough. right up to the modern day. So they're critical of Hegel and his lack of interest in considerations about the future, and that's again just being critical of modernity, because they're incorrectly defining modernity as most people might define it, as being about the now, whereas even if you if we said earlier that modernity is like to boldly go and to advance, then you have to have a plan for the future, and the only way you can do that is by you can't show people what you haven't yet created. So in order to do that, you need symbols and imagery, and so by attacking the symbolic and imagery of society, they attack the goals of that society and warp them and destroy them. So they're talking about Hegel. His philosophy cannot be prescriptive because it understands only in hindsight, and really they're just critiquing modernity there, I think, in a sense. The study of history that is thus limited to the description of past and present realities. So they're attempting to say that postmodernism will be more future orientated, which couldn't be more further from the truth, because they're all about looking back into the past, but only looking back into the past of capitalist societies in order to critique the events that went on there, and to critique the symbolic foundations of the society, while also possibly raising the symbolic relations of their own culture. Now, the study of history is thus limited to the description of past and present realities, so past and present but not future. Hence, for Hegel and his successors, dialectics inevitably led to the approval of the status quo, we just can't have that. Indeed, Hegel's philosophy served as a justification for Christian theology, and the Prussian state, which the cultural Marxists hate, obviously. So this was fiercely criticized by Marx and the young Hegelians, who argued that Hegel had gone too far in defending this abstract concept of absolute reason, and failed to notice the real, i.e. undesirable and irrational life conditions of the working class. By turning Hegel's idealist dialectics upside down, Marx advanced his own theory of dialectic materialism, arguing that it is not the consciousness of men that determines their being, but on the contrary, their social being that determines their consciousness. So again, that's just nature before nurture kind of philosophy. We know now, because of science, that it's about half and half. Your genetics determine your intelligence, and that will determine your social standing. We also see this principle of Marx here that we just went over. This is also embodied in Guy Debord's work, where he says, that the claim that alienation is more of an emotive description. The claim that alienation is more than a motive description of an aspect of an individual's psychology, rather it is a consequence of the form of social organization. So there we see that Freud and Marx are basically on the same footing, and that psychology and communism are essentially the same thing, and both of them emerged out of the Frankfurt School, or were pushed by the Frankfurt School, I should say. Here we see influences in early works, which you can kind of think of it as a timeline of cultural Marxist theory, if you like. So historical context and Weberian theory, you can kind of look at that as where they're sitting down and just examining all of Western culture to say what makes it tick, essentially, and try to see if there are any weaknesses in it and if we can exploit them. Freudian theory is obviously a similar thing, but it's focused more on the relationships between people within society, and looking at neurosis, and pushing kind of the idea that a healthy society is one that is. E. Michael Jones does good work on this, the Guy Guide to Cultural Marxism, I think it's called, or the Frankfurt School. So psychology is really just a psychological operation, as all of these things are, against white society, white Christian society and the patriarchy. So that's where we get psyop from, and distanciation. It's all about breaking down the family unit. So children are encouraged, a child is only seen as healthy if he dislikes his parents, and parents obviously disliking their children by divorcing each other or through abortion, which are things that are pushed in politically anyway. Also undermining the Christian family unit by introducing concepts like the Oedipus complex and suggesting that it's healthy to be attracted to your child or sexually, or the other way around. Critique of which is just, you can see where it's just going. Critique of positivism. Now this is in relation to Horkheimer, who argued, one of the guys in the Frankfurt School, Horkheimer, argued that the problem is epistemological, which is about the study of being. So yeah, I mean, white societies exist, that's the problem, is what he's saying there. We should reconsider not merely the scientist, but the knowing individual in general. So that's what the critique of positivism is about. And actually, it's going after science, the scientific methodology, and trying to inject cultural Marxist beliefs into it. Or what it's really doing is trying to remove any symbolic or metaphysical notion from science, so that when we talk about science, we can't talk about God. The two have to be mutually exclusive. And not only that, but they want to reconsider every knowing individual in general. So if you are even remotely intellectual or interested in scientific methodology, you will have to be an atheist. That's what they're basically saying. And so again, it's destroying our symbols and to leave society adrift, and then people will be more easily manipulated and will follow along with the amoral social order that's going to come into effect under their ruling. Aesthetic modernism, which describes the liberation of the unconscious, consciousness of the unique. I mean, I don't know an awful lot about that. You could possibly state that it has something to do, well, it's obviously psychological, possibly has to do with expanding consciousness, so it could be related to drug culture. Marxist theory, we've obviously gone over that. It's a lot of communist theory. And culture theory, which is the thing that we said Star Trek Discovery might be based on, where you're kind of raising up the lower classes, or not lower classes, they've done away with that because that failed with the communist revolution. So instead they're just looking at minorities. So that's why they put a black woman in as the main character in Star Trek, even though Star Trek never really had a main character before. It was sort of a host of characters, a cast of characters. And then the engineer was gay, and the chief medical officer was gay. They were both gay lovers. That again, so homosexuals being considered a protected class, and in quotation marks. And finally, who else? Oh, and then of course the white male is the oppressor and the evil guy. So okay. So let's move on to Jean Baudrillard and just quickly look at some of his. So he's related to postmodernism through his theory of simulacra, which progressing historically from the Renaissance to the Industrial Revolution. Also, from the Renaissance, in which dominant simulacra were in the form of the counterfeit, so art mostly of people or objects. And then he looks at the Industrial Revolution, in which the dominant simulacrum is the product, the series, which can be propagated on an endless production line. So again, it's and then so I suppose today's simulacra would be information, visual, digital films and information on the internet. So one of his sort of most important works was on the Gulf War. Raised his public profile, he argued that the first Gulf War was that it wasn't really a war. According Saddam Hussein was not fighting the coalition, but using the lives of his soldiers as a form of sacrifice to preserve his power. The coalition fighting the Iraqi military was merely dropping 10,000 tons of bombs daily, as if proving to themselves that there was an enemy to fight. So too the Western media, complicit, presenting the war in real time by recycling images of war to propagate the notion that the US-led coalition and the Iraqi government were actually fighting. But such was not the case. Saddam Hussein did not use his military capacity. The Iraq Air Force, his power was not weakened, evinced by his easy suppression of the 1991 internal uprising that followed afterwards. Overall, little had changed. Saddam remained undefeated. The victors were not victorious, and thus there was no war, i.e. the Gulf War did not occur. So, yeah, another one of his points that he states in Millennium is that because there was cameras on the front of the missiles as they went into buildings and blew them up, because it was represented, just as Guy Debord said that all representation is unreality, that didn't really occur. So it's kind of a strange conspiracy theory in a sense, but he was heavily criticised for that. Some critics accused Baudrillard of instant revisionism, a denial of the physical action of the conflict, which was related to his denial of reality in general. And I think that was another point of his Millennium, because this was all pre the year 2000, and that the worry over what was going to come in the millennium, some kind of apocalypse, was again in itself unreal or something, and so that afterwards everything would be, when the apocalypse didn't happen, everything would again be sort of unreal. But as we know, that's directly after the millennium, we had the terrorist attacks of 11th of September 2001, and here he seems to have shifted his position, claiming that while the Gulf War didn't happen, 9/11 absolutely did. He says of it, this is not a clash of civilizations or religions, but it was actually globalization fighting against itself. So this idea that he's obviously against capitalism and then views globalization as capitalism running amok over society, but that's not really true. We'll look into that in greater detail later on. So postmodernism sort of continues through the work of Will Self and other people like Nick Ayres, who did a lot of strange, ironic sort of research into conspiracy theories, or it seemed ironic, but he said some stuff like, I made the argument that the foot and mouth disease that struck England in the early 2000s, where you've probably seen the scenes where they were burning loads of animals, that he said that was a kind of an animal sacrifice. So in the wake of 9/11, obviously conspiracy theories started to mount, because there was obviously some massive problem in our society, and it wasn't coming from a group of terrorists sitting in a cave in Afghanistan. It was far too technologically advanced, so it had to be coming from the top down, or from some technologically advanced source. So around this time, we had David Icke and his theory that the world was being run by an elite group of 13 bloodlines all connected to the Bilderberg Group and the Council of Foreign Relations, and he mentioned Rothschilds and the Zionist order. He's one of the first people to really speak out about that in public. But his main kind of concept to begin with was that these people were actually shape-shifting reptilians, that they were that they came from a long line of reptilian sort of creatures, and that when they got angry they could shapeshift into reptilians, kind of alien things. So at the time, a lot of Jewish people immediately jumped on it and started saying that he was anti-Semitic, but it was clear that if you listen to any of his radio programs, he was actually talking about lizard people, like it wasn't a metaphor or anything. He actually believed that these people were a reptilian race. So then from here we had Michael Tessarian's work, where he said that the people in control now and running the war, like the war on terror, which I think David Icke pointed out that the way George Bush keeps saying it, he keeps saying the war on terra, as in the war on Earth. So it could be to do with the idea of like the reptilians against the humans again. But Tessarian said that there's, that they weren't really snake people, but that the symbol of the snake was very important to them. And that's why we see, Monty Python, Cobra, and the serpent sort of popping up in many different places with regard to this group. So since the David Icke kind of drew the link, it kind of restored an idea of symbolism to society, where we could talk about these corrupt sort of powerful people as reptiles. And even though he was being literal, it didn't matter. It became a symbol, became symbolic in a sense. So now we can look at what these people are saying to see what their actual goals are. This is from a website called Happy Goy. We believe everything they say on TV. So if you remember in the Culture of Critique, or in Guy Debord's work, he was talking about how critical thought is being destroyed by capitalist society. Now we see that in our cultural Marxist infected society, that have images gone away? No, because one of the important things about postmodernism is that it will not be it is not held accountable. It does not cling to dogmatically to its own doctrinal assumptions, which means that it has doctrinal assumptions, but it doesn't cling to them, because if it needs a get out clause, it can. So first it's saying, oh, images are bad, but then if the news is pumping out lies against President Trump, for example, they will say, oh, how dare you call us fake news. So in that sense, they'll stand up for their culture of the spectacle. And they also do that, like they'd say, with regard to cultural Marxism and culture theory. They will say, like, oh, white people are oppressors, blacks need to stand up, etc., etc. If a white person isn't interested in marrying a black person, oh, there's a problem there, they're racist. But then again, if we look on the David Icke website, and there's a little bit here, apartheid Israel Jewish agency head, non-Jews marrying Jews is an actual plague. So it's perfectly okay for them to be racist, and as we'll see here, they are extremely racist. Here's a quote from the 6th Prime Minister of Israel. Our race is the master race. We are divine gods on this planet. We are as different from the inferior races as they are from insects. Other races are beasts and animals, cattle at best. That's what the word goy means, I believe. Our destiny is to rule over the inferior races. The masses will lick our feet, and serve us as our slaves. So you see this idea of the globalists they aren't distinct from the cultural Marxists. They're the same group. The goal of abolishing the white race is on its face so desirable that some may find it hard to believe that it could incur any opposition other than from committed white supremacists. Make no mistake about it, we intend to keep bashing the dead white males, and the live ones, and the females too, until the social construct known as the white race is destroyed. See, they're not even saying that the white race is real. It's a social construct. So they're trying to turn people into images, and that's from a Jewish professor and whatever. So another cultural Marxist, Frankfurt School type. Abe Foxman, Anti-Defamation League president. We are ready to implement our most important and ambitious program, one which will finally and totally remove from existence the impediments of our absolute control of this earth. I speak of the death of the white race. We now control the destiny of this race. Goes on to say how the president of the European Parliament says the new Germany exists only in order to ensure the existence of the state of Israel and the Jewish people. This is from a Jewish rabbi. It is in the Jewish interest, it is in humanity's interest that whites experience a genocide. Until white children are burned alive, white women raped, mutilated, murdered, and all white men who have not been slaughtered watch powerlessly as their people are terrorized. Only then will mankind be on an more equal footing, as a communist idea, ready to discuss white privilege and the apparent white privilege is a cultural theory idea, and the apparent chip on the shoulder that minorities have. Again, cultural theory. So this whole idea of cultural theory, don't be racist, anti-racism, it is the most racist of all theories. And you see there's loads more, quite a few more. And this isn't even a full list by any means. So how can these people get away with this this kind of rhetoric? Well, it all comes down to another kind of image. So, we haven't been allowed. I remember when I was in college, they were talking about how symbolism was a dead language. Meanwhile, all the movies being made in Hollywood were full of symbolism. That was, but no one, because we'd been told that symbolism was no longer an extant language, no one was looking for the symbols anymore. But if you look at, say, Schindler's List, for example, that's full of symbolism. But in a sense, the whole thing is symbolic, really. Yeah, so that's basically we say that the Iraq War didn't happen. If you were to say that the Holocaust didn't happen, that could be an issue. So why is it all right to say that the Iraq War didn't happen when there's clearly dead bodies, but there's not concrete hard evidence that 6 million Jews were gassed in Auschwitz or whatever. That in itself is a kind of a simulacra, and is because of that they are, Jews are like, they will call people a Nazi or a white supremacist for speaking out against them, when if we're not allowed to discuss stuff, then surely aren't they the oppressive ones? I mean, all you're doing is talking about it. They say but it starts with talking and then it becomes genocide. But does it? I mean, how does that work? Especially if we're not sure of the reality, of the Holocaust. How do we know it's not just a spectacle in itself? A counterfeit simulacra. That's what I want to know. So to finish up, we could look at another definition of postmodernism. Okay, so if you think about the meaning of the word postmodernism, on the surface it is a contradiction. If modernity represents our God-given natural talents to progress as a species in the here and now, then postmodernism suggests that the now is over and that we as a people have nothing left to offer our society. What is the word used to describe the state or condition of a person who is no longer present in the now, has nothing left to offer society, their friends or family? They've passed on from this world and no longer have any agency. We call that state death. Therefore, the definition of postmodernism with respect to our society and the individual is death. You are post-agency, no longer an agent for the continued existence of your own culture or racial foundation. You have become a defector and operate against your own state, your own people, your own self-interest, your own existence. So that is the meaning behind postmodernism. Okay, thanks for watching.